All right. All right. We are live. If you are watching this on the replay, which you probably will be at this point if you see the first intro part, I'm doing something a little different over here on the YouTube channel and the Scoop podcast because that's what I like to do. I like to mix things up. And I've seen some really good opportunities with some ladies that I've known for a really long time and then almost kind of re-met later on in life. And the guest that we are going to be chit-chatting with today is Lacie Nash. Lacie, it was actually one of my original 12 customers when I first started my pooper scooper business. And I had no idea that she and her best friend were either they had started a business or soon would be starting a cleaning business. And over that past 6 or 7 years, I believe,
It'll
you've
be
grown it
coming
to
now.
you've grown it to a seven-figure business. And I'm super excited to chat with you. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes. And how Lacie and I got reconnected was we were connected on social media and we were chatting, but also Trish and I, my business partner with She Built That, we started a community and Lacie is one of the core members of our community. And Lacie has been pouring so much information from what she has learned throughout business. And what we're going to really talk about today is company culture because you don't grow a business of Lacie's size by accident.
Exactly.
Exactly. So, all right, Lacie, you give us the highlight reel about, the rundown, how we got here today, and then we're going to hump. we're going to, it's hump day. It's Wednesday.
Perfect.
We're going to hop into company culture.
Yeah, absolutely. During the time that I've owned my business and ran it together with my best friend, culture has always been a focus of ours from day one. When you run a business with your friend, you find out very quickly what you want to have in your space, in your environment, where you make your bread and butter, and what you don't want to have. So it's always been a conversation piece for us. As we've grown our business to seven figures, that's ended up branching us off into some other spaces. That's where the culture framework came from. But over time, we have really drilled into what are the qualities, behaviors, disciplines that we want to have in our business that help shape company culture. And so I'm really excited to talk about it today and dive in.
Me too, because what I've realized is I know that this might sound kind of crazy, but for me, it was super easy to grow a business from 0 to 100,000. I mean, it was me. I had to just show up. I had to do what I knew how to do. I didn't have to communicate with anybody other than the customer, which was super simple. I didn't have to explain what I was doing to anybody.
Absolutely.
The
Yeah.
hump that when going and hiring one person, fine. Two people, okay. Every time I go to that third person, I feel like I really start to fall apart. And I didn't quite understand why. I didn't have company culture.
Yeah. And that's a really common thing that happens, Erica, is when you haven't actually sat down to think about what you want this to look like and how you're going to accomplish it, just like revenue goals or marketing plans, it's the same way with company culture. And oftentimes what happens is that focus ends up being last because you need dollars. You need marketing to get those dollars. You need systems and processes in order to execute your business. But what you don't think about are what are the behaviors or the characteristics of the people that you want on your team. What are the things that they're going to have, the qualities that they're going to have, or the micro disciplines that you have within your company that are going to also help shape that and maintain a good company culture. So it's not surprising to hear that.
No. And goodness, I hope you can help me. I want you to save me today. All right. So, what does company culture mean to you today at a seven-figure business versus what it meant to you back when you were just getting started?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning days, I think, Carrie and I were just kind of chasing our own tails. We were out there in the field and working, long hours, but then also estimating jobs, doing payroll at night. And so at that point, company culture was not really a focus of ours because we were just doing what we had to do to get by. But you do figure out very quickly once you hire those first team members that there are things that you have to focus your efforts on in order to have a space where people enjoy coming, but also where they're going to go out into the field and represent your company well. And so, in the early days, company culture was not even a focus of ours. But over time, you do determine that, it's not necessarily something that you can just let happen by chance. You do have to have some sort of authority over what that looks like in your organization, and not so much what you want, how you want people to show up, but what are the management disciplines that allow space for people to show up and show up well for your company. So now it's just, it's something that we realize you can't leave it up to chance. And in the early days, we did that because we weren't really focused on what do we want this to look like. And so over the years, we figured out, okay, this is what we want it to look like, and this is how we're going to get there. And I think ideally, people think about what kind of culture they want to have, but they don't think about what are the things that I have to do in order to get there. And that's where the breakdown happens a lot.
Okay. If somebody is like, I don't understand like what company culture is, what is company culture?
Yeah, that's a great question. Company culture is the heart of your business. It's the heart of your mission and your vision, right? So you can put out a mission and a vision all you want, but if your team is not bought into that, if they have terrible attitudes or they feel negatively about their roles within your company, if on Sunday night they're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, tomorrow's Monday, I don't want to do it, then you have a culture, you have fissures in the company culture, right? You want your people to be excited about coming to work and feel rewarded in their effort, whether that be financially or emotionally. And so, in order to do that, there are just certain things that you put in place that help shape that. So, yeah.
That is so important to think about. It's the heart. It's the heart of your company. Because so many people focus, we got the vision statement, we got our core rules, but people don't even remember what those are,
Yeah. Yeah, because culture says, okay, we have this system and it's great. But culture says, not only do we have this system and it's great, but we all believe in it. And so because of that, we value it. Right. And so we can have systems all day long, but if when your team is out there, you don't have great company culture, they're going to say, I'm going to do what I want anyways. It's no big deal. Why is this a priority? Right. But when you have great company culture, they look at that and they say, I believe in Carrie and Lacie, who own Clean Squad, and I believe in the system. I believe in the mission and vision that we're doing. And I believe that my contribution means something more than just making sure that I check this box. And so that really changes what's happening on a holistic level. It's not just with those tiny things, it's all of it.
I imagine this isn't something that we really should wait until we have a team. Can we talk about what it looks like when you're just getting started in business? You're a one-woman operation. How do you start developing culture there?
Yeah, I think in the early days of, having a company, I mean, we all sit and talk about what our goals are for our companies, right? How much revenue we want to do, what do we want our team sizes to look like, how much impact do we want to have in the community? And those are all really great things that is the basis through which you funnel all other things through, But part of that conversation or that goal setting should be, what do you want the company culture to look like? And I think we focus so much on other things that we negate. We neglect that part of it. And I think that is really a critical component, because when you're ready for that first hire or that second hire or that third hire, if you have your company culture outlined and you know what you want that to look like, it helps you to fit those puzzle pieces together. It helps you to look at the candidates that are coming in your door and you can say, this person is a great culture fit, right? So at Clean Squad, we hire for integrity and we train for skill. And we always have done that. And the reason why is because those employees who have integrity and they, are really great culture fits, we can teach them how to clean all day long. Because when things don't go the way that they're supposed to, or they make mistakes, they're going to own up to it and they're going to say, you know what, tomorrow's a better day. How can I do better? Right. So that's the problem that I see with a lot of early starting companies, though, is that they're so, you got fuel, your foot's on the gas pedal and you're trying to grow this business, but you haven't actually sat down and thought, okay, what do I want my team to look like? What are the skill sets that are necessary to have a team that I not only know are going to represent my company well, but I want to barbecue with them? Because if you don't think about the barbecuing aspect, if you don't think about, and the reason I say that is like, it's just the way that we can think about it, conceptualize spending time with these people. Because that is what you're doing. You're going to spend time with them, whether it be virtually, in a meeting, at a Christmas party, whatever that looks like. But also your clients are spending time with them. So what do you want your clients to spend time with, right? Because they're the ones out there spending time with your clients. So if I don't want to barbecue with you, I probably don't want you barbecuing with my clients. So what does that look like? What are the skill sets, qualities? Are they positive? Do they have drive and determination? And so you start thinking about that in the very early days, because then when it's time, when you have to hit the gas pedal on hiring, you already know exactly what you need to do in order to get those candidates.
Okay. This is so good. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about, the one woman operation, they're just getting started. They're sitting down and they're trying to figure all this out. How important is it to look inward? I know so much personal development has happened being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
If you don't have good integrity as a business owner, if you're not showing up, if you're not taking accountability, you're already starting to start the culture off poorly.
Absolutely. And I do think that there's a lot to be said about building up your leadership ability as your company grows. But you do absolutely have to have that mindset of like, the leader that I am now is not the leader that's going to get me to a 7-figure company. It's just not. And I think, when you're building your company culture, you should be thinking about, what does this look like when I'm 2, 5, or 10x, right? And that's the thing is like, when in the very early days, it might be fine for you to jump in the car with somebody who works for you that you're in the field with and have a conversation around the behaviors that you want to see in your company. But when you're 10x the size, that doesn't work. And so what does that look like when you're 10x the size, right? What does it look like now? And what skill sets and behaviors and, routines, disciplines do you have now that you're going to outgrow? And so I think, that's basically it. Like, you just have to start looking at that and thinking about, how do you develop yourself as a leader? What skill sets do you have that are really good? What skill sets complement that? What do you want your team to have? You really have to look at every role within your organization and think about, like, okay, this person might be super disciplined, so they might be better in an office role. This person might not be. Does this office role need discipline? Yes, more than likely, right? Or are they not super creative and they can just follow a checklist? They might be better to scoop, right? Or they might be better to clean because they just need to do the job, So what does each role look like? What are the skill sets necessary for them to be successful in that? And then that really helps you to have a baseline for you to go from when you're hiring for those roles.
Where would you say, as you were starting to hire, can you tell us, like, what did your first hire look like? And
Yeah.
can you I think that's really important, because I think that's where a lot of people are scared. They're so
Mhm.
afraid for that first hire.
Yeah. I will say that I think engaging in your industry is huge. And I know when we're first starting our business, a lot of us are like, listen, we're just hitting the gas. We just got to get this going. We don't really consider how impactful engaging with other business owners in our space is. And, in the beginning, we didn't do that because we didn't even know it existed and it wasn't a priority to us. I am a part of a worldwide industry for the cleaning industry. And that has been really pivotal for us in terms of growing our business. It has also helped us to rub elbows with business owners that are much larger than us. And so that helps you to think about that 10X, right? So if you're not engaging in that space, as an industry, you should for sure. But I think, the biggest thing is buffering.
No, you're good. While you're buffering, I want to just give a shout out. when I was at an event over the week or last week, there was a woman named Libby, and she was all in her orange, looking super fabulous.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I need to talk to her. And so, just chit chatting. And I went and followed her on social, and I said, Lacey's following her. So they know each other. So there was a connection. So
Yeah.
I was able to utilize my network, make a connection with Libby. And then
Yeah.
I took a picture of me and Libby, sent it to you. And I've come to find out that you and Libby you guys do a coffee chat together, like
Yeah.
big players in the cleaning space. And I'm just like, this is crazy. I love
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, being able to network with other people in your space is huge. I just think that when you're in the weeds with growing your business, it's very difficult to think about what does that look like when you're larger, and what are the things that you need to do in order to get there, and what are the things that you need to be focusing on when you're smaller. So, yeah.
It is, and being able to, like, see past all the work that you have to do and the paperwork, when you start getting around other people that are like, "Yeah, I've been there, done that. This is what is possible." It's like, "Okay, I came back super excited and super inspired, put my head down and started working, and now I'm not so scared to go to that 500,000 and then go to 1,000,000, because it's like, okay, I have people in my corner now. If I have a question about company culture, because I didn't really understand it too much, I know who to ask.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it doesn't have to be these massive parties, and you don't have to spend all this money. I realized just having a what is it? A company meeting every Friday. I bring donuts and coffee, which I believe you recommended that to me.
Yeah.
That's been huge. That's been huge for us.
Yeah, and that's what culture really is like, especially as you scale your business. In the early days, what happens is business owners, they think about culture and they think about pizza parties. And I'm sorry, but that's not it. You can have a pizza party with a team that is so burnt out and so
Corporate America.
disconnected.
Corporate America does that.
Yeah. And how many times do we talk about that? And the reason we talk about that is because I'm sorry, but like when we're in the weeds with this, that is not going to make anything better. But what does make things better are leaders that are engaged, are leaders that are accountable, right? Are leaders that really hear what you have to say. And so when you're shaping your company culture and what that looks like, especially in the early days, the next step is to figure out, how do we engage the team in order to get this goal of having a specific culture accomplished, right? So the culture framework, there's 4 pillars, and we work through those pillars in order to create a really good company culture. But as leaders, you have to sit down and look at yourself. You have to have self accountability, in order to figure out where you want your company to go, because there may be things that you just don't do well, and that's okay. Be accountable for that though, right? And I think accountability for your team is huge. It goes so far, because when they recognize that you also are not perfect, you make mistakes, you don't always have all the answers, they can get behind that, because that's real, right? And I think pre-COVID, we had a management culture that was just like, I'm supposed to have all the answers and I'm supposed to know what's going on. And, I can never make mistakes. But I think once society went through COVID, we looked at it and we said, coming out of this, if you're not a strong leader, you're going to struggle, because your team was looking at you in COVID going, what is happening next? My entire income is in your hands, but also as owners, we were looking at it going, yeah, it is. And I don't know what the answer is. We didn't have a choice because we had never been through that before, right? So with COVID, Clean Squad lost their entire team when we came back. I paused services for 7 weeks. When we got back, we had no team. We had 150 clients to service. And so Carrie and I looked at each other and we said, well, I guess we're getting back in the field, and we got really scrappy with it. I hired my husband, she hired her sister, and we got back to work. But through that, what we did was we looked at each other and we said, okay, what kind of leadership is necessary in order to have a company culture where when this happens again, we're not coming back with no team members, because they're so engaged in what we have going on that they also can't wait to get back to work, right? They also can't wait to see each other. They can't wait to see us, And so that's when we really started digging in on what are those behaviors from management that are going to create that culture.
Okay, can you give us maybe 2 or 3 examples of behaviors?
Yeah. So one of the things that we do, because like I said, it's not pizza parties. Our team work independently. They're out there solo every day, Monday through Friday. So one of the things that we value, and it's very expensive to us as a business, is we have a Monday morning meeting every single Monday. And during that meeting, we talk about wins, we talk about failures, we do a training topic. We might teach them, customer service skills. We might talk about sales. And so, that meeting is super important to us because while they're out there solo, sometimes they do have to tag in on jobs. Sometimes they need to know that, somebody's husband has cancer. Sometimes they need to know that somebody's going through a divorce. This is how we support each other as a team. And so, when they're out there and their routes change because somebody had to go to a doctor's appointment for their husband who has cancer, they're not out there being bitter about that because they understand as a team, we support one another. And so having them engage in that space together is really beneficial because then they kind of get to know each other and all that stuff. The other thing that we do that's really integral to our company culture is we do one-on-ones with our team. Cleaning is a very subjective space. And so how do we navigate those expectations that the clients have when they are sometimes so drastic, right? But also, how do we make sure that we have behaviors in our team that are things that we want in our company culture? And so during our one-on-ones, they're about 10 minutes. We do them virtually now. And that's one of the things that has changed as we scaled. So, when you're starting those very early stages of shaping the company culture and the behaviors and the rituals that you want to have as a management team, you have to look at, okay, we're doing this right now, person to person in an office, but can we do that when we're 10x the size? And if we can't, what does that look like? And so they're virtual now, but they are reciprocal. It's feedback around the board. So the other thing with that is it's at a set cadence. So, you have to be very disciplined with those things at set cadences because what that tells your team is that I value this. It's important to me. And it also should be important to you. But this is when it's happening. So come prepared. Right? Because that helps the conversations and that space that is sacred for that feedback, both to management and to your team, be a space where everybody knows that it's happening and they can come ready for that. And so during those one-on-ones, we talk about, what is the performance like? We ask them to toot their own horn because sometimes there's stuff happening out there in the field that we don't necessarily know about. And then the other aspect of that is that they then give us feedback about their workload and their scheduling, and do they have the things that they feel they need to have to be prepared for their job? And Carrie and I value that feedback back to us because if you don't allow that space with that, that forum for them to voice their opinion or, grievances or upset, then it festers and it becomes cancerous. So there are some expectations around that one-on-one. There's a 5-star rating system. If they come with any less than 5 stars for anything, they have to give us the reason why. And the feedback is the same on their end. And so, it's very sacred to us.
How are you scheduling these one-on-ones? Is it before work, after work? Are they at home at Zoom? How does that work?
So our team works on commission. So, the time in between houses that they have or before or after their route, it's commission. So, they do clock into it. Obviously, we have to meet labor laws and stuff like that. But essentially, we just schedule them on a specific day of the week. And at any point, they just huddle into us via Slack. We have our 10-minute conversation. It's virtual, all the forms are virtual. And then we document it in their file. So they can dip into that at any point during the day when it works best for them. And the good thing about that is that, I might be in a better headspace when my route is starting versus when it's finishing, and so we allow them the opportunity to choose that because I'm fine. As long as you're fine, I'm fine, so.
That's cool. For some reason, like when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, it's something so serious and it has to be all planned out and everything needs to be perfect. And you're like, hey, today's the day. You pick whatever time. And I feel like that is also part of the culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Our team, since they work on commission, we do not have a hard start time for them. They are allowed to start their first house anytime between 8 and 9 a.m. If it's 9:01, you'll hear from us. But if it's between 8:01 and 9 o'clock, it's fine as long as you're clocked into your first house, which allows them the freedom to get their kids to school, or, get their kid to school and then get ready, or whatever that looks like. And so the one-on-one situation is very similar to that. They just dip in when they're ready for it. But I think having that set cadence, because we meet with them every other week. So having that set cadence of this day is your one-on-one day allows for all parties to come to that conversation ready to have any conversation that needs to happen. There's nothing worse than having to never speak to an employee on your team, and then you have to have a disciplinary conversation or give them negative feedback, right? Because they're not willing or able to receive that if they never hear from you otherwise. And so I think that's the good part about having that reciprocal feedback during those one-on-ones is sometimes the conversation is super easy, right? It's, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. Toot your own horn. Awesome. Didn't know that happened. Congratulations. Might be bought a new car or whatever. But when you have those conversations and you have them often, when you have to have that conversation where the message is not necessarily amazing, both for them or for you to have to deliver, it just makes it much easier. And especially when they have the opportunity to also deliver those not nice messages to you regarding maybe their workload. Right? So when you have that reciprocal feedback all the time, it just makes those conversations where you do have to have disciplinary or, feedback that a client gave that you have to deliver, it makes it so much less massive and detrimental, to their day. Because let's be real, we're humans. Cleaning is subjective. So are they going to get feedback from clients? Yes. Is it all valid and legit? Not necessarily, but some of it is. So how do we get that and lessen the impact so that we can just keep it moving?
And I love that you do it every other week. So it's not like, oh, it's been 3 months. I'm nervous about this. It's whatever. Like, we do it every other week.
Exactly. And, that's the thing is, I think after COVID, we started really drilling into the behaviors that management needed to have. And what we realized is that communication is a two-way street. And everybody says that. But what does that mean? What it means is that I can communicate a message to you all day long. You may hear it, but are you actually receiving it? And whether you're actually receiving it or not depends on what is your attitude for the day? How's your mood? Did you get a flat tire on the way to work? You know what I mean? So if I have to deliver feedback to you and I know that you got a flat tire on the way to work, I'm not going to say, well, we must have this one-on-one right now. Are you going to be able to receive anything I'm saying to you? Of course not. So, okay, take a breather, clean your route if you want to, and we'll talk about it later. Or maybe as the leader, I just decide, you know what? This is not a huge deal today for me to address this. Let's just talk about it in 2 weeks. But when you have that set cadence, both parties are able to come to that conversation knowing that if something's bothering me, I'm going to see you in 14 days. So, I can decide, like, is it really that important? Do I want to sleep on it?
What do you say to the person that's like, I'm just so busy, I don't have time for this?
Yeah. So that's the thing about company culture is it is literally management discipline. That's what shapes it. It's management discipline. You have to look at the behaviors you have to look at the things that you want to execute within the four walls of your organization. And you have to decide what of these things are a priority to us. And if that is a hinge point to the culture that you want to have, you must prioritize it. You have to, because if you don't prioritize it as the leader, your team is also not going to prioritize it. So yeah, we allow them to dip in whenever they want to. That works for us because we're here 8 to 5, but it might not work for all companies. So what does work for you? Figure out how you can create a structure or a system or a, discipline that your team can funnel into. Maybe it's only Monday through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you can't do it, right? So you just have to sit down and say, okay, this is the behavior that I want to have. This is how important it is for me to value this. And how can I fit this into my schedule in a way that I can be successful first? Because I can't ask my team to be successful with it if I'm also not.
Okay. If somebody's listening, which we do have people listening, and there's some questions in the chat, which I'll read those a little bit later. But say the person's listening, they're like, okay, I'm going to do this. We're going to get this set up. How do I do it?
Yeah. So first of all, I can help you. Obviously, the culture framework is a system. It is, a bunch of modules that help you to understand where do you want your culture to start and how do you build that. It's 4 pillars. You have to lead yourself first. You have to engage with your team, right? You have to align with structure. and then you develop leaders and momentum, right? So that's exactly the 4 pillars that create the culture framework. But I think it's just really basically sitting down and saying, like, okay, what do I want this to look like? What kind of team do I want to have? What are the necessary skills that they have to have? Soft skills, right? Do they have to be personable? Because in my field, they absolutely have to be personable. In your field, you might be okay with somebody who's a little rough around the edges, right? So I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. Just depends on what role you're putting them into. And so you look at all of those things and then you decide, okay, how am I going to track this candidate? And then once I have them, what are the micro systems, micro disciplines that I'm going to have in my company to make sure that we stay on pace with that? Because like I said earlier, we hire for integrity, train for skill. So obviously skill is a component that we're going to talk about during one-on-ones, right? Because we have to. That's the job we're doing. But we also are going to talk about, hey, you're a little bit negative today, or every time you come to a meeting, you don't have anything positive to say. What's going on in your world? Positivity is a core value around here. Or for us, communication is a core value. And so I would much rather you over communicate with me than under communicate and don't tell me anything, right? So our one-on-ones are filtered around that. We talk about those things all the time because that's what we value. So.
And you know your employee's personality type, right?
Yes.
As well?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because that's going to allow you. Go ahead.
It's through our hiring process. They all take a personality test. It does allow us to have coaching questions for them, interview questions. We can compare them to other team members. So that's really great too, for sure.
Because I liked what you said about when you're having the conversation with them. If they're having a rough day, they're not going to be able to hear you. And it made me think of my husband and how I know his personality type. So I'm like, okay, when I need to have a big conversation, I need to deliver in a way that he's going to hear it, not in a way that I would deliver it because my personality is so different.
Absolutely. And I think that is, that is a really important factor to just communication in general. But obviously, as business owners, and especially when you get to a 7-figure mark, there are times where you have to just check the box, right? Like we have to have a one-on-one. But I think having the conversation or knowing, like setting the framework for what that looks like allows for those opportunities for them to show up wholly themselves and just say, listen, I was up all night. My husband has cancer. He's vomiting, like whatever that looks like. And then us being able to decide, okay, we're going to reconvene about this in 14 days, And so I think showing up wholly as leaders is important, super important. Your team should know about your failures before your wins, as far as I'm concerned. But I think allowing that space for your team to also do that is super critical, because you can't actually get the mission and vision accomplished if when you're trying to run the business, you negate the fact that these are human beings. They have personalities, they have things going on in their lives too. And so, yeah, definitely learning how to communicate with them in a way that works for them. But I think when you set that framework and that structure, it really allows for that to happen. If you don't have those micro habits, it's hard for you to know how to communicate with somebody if you haven't met with them every 2 weeks. If it's every 3 months, like you said, I don't know anything about this person.
Yeah, you don't even know them. They're a stranger. Yeah. Oh, man, it's so good. Okay, so we have 2 comments. First, we're going to start with Justin Brock. Can you see this message right here on our screen?
Yeah.
Okay. It says, this is hitting home. Just hired my first scooper, and he did his first day. He's trustworthy. So the thing is, he is lacking on can be taught. The messaging and gate check photos were lacking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's too what it boils down to is, when you have really good core values, when you have things established within your company that you want your candidates to check the box on, for us, it's being coachable. That's a huge factor, because here's the thing. Everybody knows that amazing baseball player that's on the team that has a terrible attitude, it doesn't matter how good they are. Because when they fall short, you're not going to be able to tell them anyways. So where are we actually going with that, right? And so when you really look at the candidates on your team and you drill into like what kind of behaviors you want them to have, you have to determine, like, am I okay with somebody who has 20 years of experience on my team? Or do I want people that have no experience? Because for me, I would rather teach somebody to clean all day long as they have a good coachable attitude. Because when you miss something or you're having an off day, I can say, hey, something's going on. You okay? And they're going to say, oh my gosh, I had a terrible day. And I know, and I did bad and whatever, and then you can have an actual factual conversation around it instead of walking around on eggshells and not knowing how they're going to receive it, So yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
Yeah, like, don't tell me I've been cleaning a house for 35 years
Yeah.
before you were born.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Lewis, I believe it's Lewis. Love seeing women running businesses. My spouse and I are watching.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. This is so good. All right. Where do we leave off on the questions? I always start to like squirrely all around. I'm like,
I think that comment kind of leads into one of the questions, actually. Number 6.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so it's where do you see most small business owners, especially female entrepreneurs, getting stuck when they are trying to grow or lead a team? And I think that this is a great question because as females and women-owned business owners, I think we often come with a lot of, we're nurturing by nature. That's how we are as human beings, right? We're mothers, we're wives, right? So I think, a lot of times we bring that with us, and I will never advocate for not doing so because I believe that as a leader, you should show up wholly yourself. And that's why I say admit failures before wins, right? Because that's just real. And I think that creating really solid connections with your teams requires you to show up as the leader that you are and as the person that you are. And so I think sometimes as women-owned businesses or leaders, we think that we have to shrink parts of ourselves in order to be successful in our spaces. And I think that is absolutely opposite of what is true. I think that we need to lean into those things and acknowledge where we have strengths and where we have weaknesses and hone those, because even though we're not men, that doesn't mean that we're less than. It just means that we're different. And so the way that we look at those things, at situations, we have very much so a culture that is built on people, and we lean into that. And as female business owners, that is a skill set where we are really strong in. Because just like with your kids, you might know, oh, so-and-so is having a bad day. It's the same way with your team members. And so to negate that, I feel like is definitely not something that would benefit us. And so we do also, I think, bring in people pleasing, and, there's a lot of other things that we bring as women in the business space. And so, lean on your male counterparts, but also your other female-owned business owners that you have in your space, because you're going to be able to glean information from them and knowledge and inspiration that you otherwise don't have. So,
did you ever have mom guilt?
Oh gosh, yes. So I've been the breadwinner in my household for many, many years. And luckily, my husband he's a great dad. And so he was hands-on with my kids. But for many years, yeah, I would have to, late nights and long days. But I think though, we lean into that in my household. I have 3 girls. And so I absolutely lean into that. And my goal is to teach them what work ethic is. It's to teach them the value of your word, right? Because if money aside, money, things, offices, cars, all of that aside, if you don't have strong work ethic and you don't have your word, then you have nothing as far as I'm concerned. And so in our household, that has absolutely been something. They have watched Carrie and I, as strong women, build this business from the ground up and feed them and house them and clothe them. And so we lean into that a lot. My youngest daughter had a bracelet making business this summer. She was out on the curb for weeks in the summer, building bracelets and stuff. So I think it's, mom guilt is there, but at the same time, you have to look at that and lean into, okay, what does that look like for my family? What lessons am I teaching them?
I love that where you said lean into your family, and they're able to see how you're navigating this business and how you're growing. And it's important for them to see all of that because yeah.
I think the people closest to you are sometimes the most challenging because they know what you were doing before and they know what you're doing now. And so they're like, is it a thing? Is it not a thing? They're not really sure, whereas other people are seeing you do it and they're like, that's a thing, So it is interesting. I think communication with your family is huge, like, hey, this is where Clean Squat's going this year. This is what we're doing, you know? And I think sharing those things, because to them, especially to the kids, you know, it's a paycheck. They don't know, they don't even know about that. They just know they have food on the counter and they're playing Little League, you know? So I think sharing those things, you know, when I've done other podcasts, my adult children have been able to see them online and they're like, oh my gosh. And it's like, yeah, it's a thing, guys. Like we're doing things, you know? And I think sharing that often with your family is important too, because they need to be able to celebrate your wins as well.
It's true. The other day, I had a good conversation with the oldest, and he was like asking me questions about the business. And he was like, "That's awesome. Like, that's really cool. I'm happy to hear it." And that was really, it was almost emotional for me and almost validating because for so many years, it was because I had a pooper scooper business. You know, the kids weren't super happy about it because of the last name.
Yeah.
It's not fun. You know, the kids did definitely get teased. And then there were some outside forces that also made fun of me that would put that into their mind, you
Yeah.
know, that I was less than because I was starting a pooper scooper business. But over the years, they've been able to see the ups and the downs, and they're almost like, you know, "I'm proud of you. You're doing it." And it was just like, "Oh,
Yeah.
finally,
Yeah.
finally, I feel like they're proud of me."
Yeah, and I think too, like, you know, just acknowledging that business is, you know, I always joke, like, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I'm just a little bit more crazy than the average Joe. Anytime you want to take on earning your own paycheck and salary, and anytime you want to wake up every single day and bet on your reputation in order to feed your family, I think you're a little bit more crazy than everybody else. And that's okay. I lean into that, right? And so I try to talk to my kids about that, because you know, there's a lot of obviously not so glamorous parts of business, but there are also a lot of really glamorous parts of business, like building a company that serves you. And I think sometimes as business owners, we get into this space where we are just grinding it out because we think that's what we have to do. And we forget that the whole reason we started this is because we didn't want to grind it out. We wanted something that served us. And so that is a culture piece as well. You know, what are the things that I'm doing in this business that relay a message to my team, right? If I'm here till 11 o'clock every night, then they don't feel safe enough requesting a day off work. And so I have to look at that behavior as the owner and say, I'm not trying to create a culture here where people think they have to grind it out for me. When it's 5 o'clock, they can clock out, you know? And so I think too, you know, as with kids, you have to show them that as well. And we can't lose sight of, you know, hey, we started this business because we needed an income. Obviously, everybody does. But also, what are the other reasons why we started it? And how do we stay focused on that so that we don't get into that grind? Because otherwise, we might as well just go collect a W 2.
It's true, and it's important to try to get that figured out. I think the reason why maybe others around me were kinda like, "Well, what's going on?" Well, because when they would ask me, I'm like, "I don't know, I'm just trying to figure it out." I didn't have the vision, I didn't have the confidence to say, "I'm gonna take it to a seven-figure business,"
Yeah.
because I hadn't developed those skills yet within.
Yeah.
So, my question to you is, like, as a leader at the level you are, what traits and habits have you developed to get you to the seven-figure mark?
Yeah, that's great. You know, in the early days, like I said, you know, we were grinding it out. So we didn't have a lot of that stuff. And I think once you sit down to really decide what do you want your culture to look like, you also have to sit down and decide how are we going to get there? And as a leader, how am I going to get that accomplished? And I think a lot of it has to do with accountability and consistency as a leader. And I think too, you know, as we're grinding it out, we lose track of why we started the business, like I said. And so you have to really start digging into what are the behaviors and disciplines as a leader that are going to help me show up for the company in that way. And I think by and large, it's choosing yourself. And we oftentimes don't do that because we have people relying on us to feed their families. And I think when you start being very disciplined with your schedule and your time and you start choosing yourself, there are a lot of really crazy things that happen as a result of that. And really good things. You know, your team sees you valuing that. They also understand what your role is a little bit more. You know, there's just all these really good things. But that discipline with yourself and your calendar and your own time is what allows you to show up open, available, disciplined in your work life. And so that's been a huge thing for me. The other thing is we very much so, Carrie and I, lean on each other to kind of self-assess or assess each other's performance, find those pitfalls, and then just be highly accountable for that. When I've made a mistake with my team, which happens because I'm human too, I want to show them that, obviously not purposely, but I want them to see that the mistake was made, and I'm going to be accountable for that. I'm going to apologize to them because that's what has to happen in order for you to maintain a really good rapport with them. And so constantly driving towards that self-discipline and then assessing where you're showing up and how you're showing up is really critical. You can't do that though if you're not disciplined with your schedule. So
It's true. And I love that you just made mention of Carrie, which we haven't really talked about her very much. But I'm curious, what's your favorite trait about Carrie
I love
on
it.
on a personal side and then on a professional side?
Yeah. So in our business, we are peanut butter and jelly, whatever you want to say, polar opposites. And that's why it works for us. I'm very much so, I'm an empath, but I'm also a very systems focused leader. So sometimes what happens is I get lost in the sauce. I'm like, this is the system. Why didn't we do the system? What happened? What's happening? And Carrie's over there going, hello, it's because they're people. They're human beings, right? And so I'm like, I forgot about that. So we're just very different leaders. She's very much so a leader that leads with her heart. And the reason that works for us together is because I'm often like, hey, like we do have this system, we need to follow it. And she's like, but, and I'm like, okay, so let's find that happy medium, right? And I think that's what really creates a great company culture is like, yes, you have systems, but you also have people. This is a very people-y industry, both clients and employees, right? And so I think because of that, her heart for our team and her heart for others is my favorite quality about her, because it's what helps keep us grounded in the mission and vision and in the culture piece, right? I'm like, let's create the system and let's run with it. And how are we going to make it successful? And she's like, don't forget the people, So.
And you can't train that.
You can't. It's just a skill set she has. And,
It's who
a
she
lot of
is.
what we bring as business owners is baggage from our past, right? And like, how were we raised? And, and I think there's a really great author that actually teaches negotiation skills and showing up as your whole self. Her name is Maury Terraport, and negotiating and bringing your whole self is all her messages. And so you think about that and you're like, okay, and then you go and you meet her or you read her book and you're like, I get it. Like I went to a talk with her and she cried during her speech. And that's not a thing that a lot of speakers will do. They just eliminate that portion of their person. And I have a hard time with that because I'm a very empathetic person. I feel energy and so sometimes when I'm speaking about something, it will just hit my heart and I will cry. And so for years I was like, you can't public speak, Lacie. There's no way. People are not going to listen to you. But then I go and I see her and I'm like, she's showing up wholly and authentically herself, and it doesn't take away from her message. And so I think that that's really important to note because we all have our unique skill sets and abilities. And I think trying to show up as a leader while leaving that at the door is just not feasible. And that's not how really strong leadership happens anymore.
It gets me thinking about this sales call that I had on Friday, and I was so very much system. Let's get through the sales call. Let's get to the close. Let's get to the overcoming objections. Close, credit card on file. We're at your house scooping. She had made mention that her husband had passed away, and that's the reason why she was reaching out. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry to hear about that. When would you like to get started? And I listened to the sales call back. I am mortified. I'm absolutely mortified. I'm going to listen to the sales call with Diane every single day until I learn how to slow down and, well, of course, the system. I have a flow that I need to get to, but focus on the people.
Right.
And something happened in my business to where something clicked and switched to where I became so process driven that I've left the empathy part. So it's still there, but she was not there on Friday. Maybe too much caffeine. I'm not really too sure.
Right.
But I get what you're saying because like the heart is so important, because if I would have just slowed down and had a connection with her, even if I didn't close the sale, maybe I would have learned what her husband's name was and learned a little bit more about them.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, when we go into situations like that, you want to close a sale, and that's great. But like, I had somebody call, their sister had a cockroach infestation, and like, that happens. It happens in spaces. Do we clean when that's happening? No, of course not. But it was an opportunity for me to educate, right? Like, you're looking to me to help you, and I can't help you, but I can educate you around what this looks like and how we can eventually help you, right? She went out and Google and left me a review, and that's great. But like, the bottom line is this: the culture says we educate, right? The culture says we communicate. And so regardless of whether I got that business or not was irrelevant to me, because in that situation, I was serving my client in whatever way they needed to be served. And so I think remembering the heart is really important. We had somebody hire us because we were the only provider that came for an estimate and addressed their dog. Like, that's the culture. That's
Yeah.
just who we are, And so it was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Like, nobody addressed Pippi. I'm sorry, but here we are, And so
I'm offended for them.
clients, and we love her, So I think too, when you look at your business and like the sales or whatever that are happening, and you just think, okay, how can I serve these people? How can I serve them? Whatever it looks like. Either way, even if you don't close that sale now, it's coming. And when you have really good culture, your team does that for you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, how do I serve them, not how I close them? I think I
mhm.
might actually write that on a sticky note and put that on my
Yeah.
desk. Thank
I
you.
have a friend who has a very successful HVAC company in Oklahoma, and one of their core values is serve others.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it, serve others. So,
Now you're pouring into a lot of people with being a leader and being a mom, all of that. How are you being poured into to continue to grow?
yeah, that's a great question. It goes back to that personal discipline. I think that, for a long time when we were growing this business, it was go, 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 grind, 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 lots of 11 o'clock nights. And then finally I said, you know what, when I work till 11 o'clock at night, I'm heading into bed at midnight, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. and I'm exhausted the next day. I can't show up for my team or my family in a way that leaves anything for them, And so I think really getting disciplined with that and choosing myself has allowed me to show up for them. And that is what drives me to be disciplined with that, right? Exercising, eating right, choosing time, quiet time for yourself, gratitude, those are all things that really fill my cup up. And so I make sure that I prioritize those now. In the early days, I didn't, because I didn't see the value in it. But I think there does come a point in business where, pouring into yourself is no longer a luxury or something that you just might do. It is literally necessary for survival. And I think as you look at very successful business owners, you will see they prioritize themselves. They absolutely do, because it's much easier to show up to a board meeting when you worked out that morning and you feel great and powerful and strong and you got all those endorphins pumping and you're feeling healthy than it is when you're drug out of bed and tired and, not hydrated and
What do you say to the person that is in the thick of it? Like, they have everybody calling them, pulling them in all the different directions. They feel guilty. They feel like they don't deserve it. They feel like, I'll put that off later. What do you say to that person?
Yeah, so I think go back to your why, because that's really important. And everybody says that, but what does that actually look like? It looks like just looking at why you started this journey and figuring out how you can make steps towards that. Because I think when we're in the weeds with it, it is really easy to just get into a space where we're putting out all these fires every day. But all fires don't necessarily all need the same approach and the same emergent response, right? Some fires are just little embers and they can sit there for a minute while you put out the big raging fires. And sometimes that big raging fire is that you didn't eat lunch today. right? And so you might have to decide like, okay, I need to eat something. I haven't eaten all day, you know? And so I think just looking at it from that view and that lens, you know, we as business owners, we have a lot of irons in the fire and a lot of people that are demanding our attention. And our friend Trish, one time she had somebody who wanted to pitch her and she said, go ahead and meet me for a run. You know, if you're going to come pitch me, I'm not already doing business with you. You don't necessarily, there's no time demand that you're afforded. So if you want to pitch me, come into my space, you know. And I think being very disciplined with your schedule in that way really helps to align those types of things, you know. So look at why you started and go back to that, because when you're in the weeds with it, it's really difficult. Even as when your business is small, it's difficult, but it's also difficult when it's big too. And so you do have to constantly go back to that and think about, okay, why did we start this business? Well, I started this business because I'm a single mom and I have 4 kids I have to get from school. Okay, so when 3 o'clock hits, you're out the door, you know? And so you have to look at that, because sometimes when 3 o'clock hits, you're like, man, I still got 4 more hours of work to do. You know, where am I going to put that? How can I be more disciplined with this next time? You know, so going back to your why really helps you. It also helps you when your why is very personal, because sometimes we start things, you know, we start things because we need an income, right? And that's very personal, but then that's where it stops. And then our why turns into, well, I want to do this for my kids, or I want to do this so I can, you know, start a homeless shelter, or I want to do this because, and that's all great. But when you're in the weeds with something, your why needs to be personal, because that homeless shelter, that's not a priority right now when you're literally drowning. And so if your why isn't personal enough, you need to make it that, because when you're in those weeds, you're going to be like, okay, I just really want to run this business from a beach in Fiji. And it makes it easier for you to think about that, you know?
I really struggled with my why. I was like, there's too many options to really narrow it down. And when I was gone in Louisville, Kentucky, I had the opportunity to hang out with Charles Nelson. We spent some one-on-one time together, and we were just talking about KPIs. And he was like, the whole writing stuff down on a napkin. And then I asked him about the why. I said, I'm really having a hard time narrowing it down. He was like, why not? And
Yeah.
I have often thought of that, of why not build a business so you can have the life that you want? Why not do this? For me, it's why not build it so then I have the opportunity to say yes whenever I want to and say no whenever I want to. And I'm not forced into a no or forced into a yes because I'm in a tough situation.
Absolutely. And that looks different for everybody. And I think that that's what's important about it, is getting into the weeds with that. What does it look like? I want to be able to go to the grocery store and never have to question when my kids want to put stuff in the cart. Right. And that's such a basic thing. But like, let's be real, groceries are expensive. And how much money do you have to make in order for your 3 kids to be able to do that? I don't know what that looks like for you. Or I want to be able to buy a house with property because I don't want to see my neighbors. Right. And what does that look like? It could look different for everybody. I want to run my business from a beach in Fiji if I want to for 30 days. Right. And what does that look like? Or I want to be able to help somebody when they need their car breaks down, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's different for every person. And I think really just deciding what that looks like for your life and building your business around that is going to just create that space where you can take care of yourself. You can take care of others. You're rewarded. You feel like it's valuable, you know, and creating that environment for your team that can do that as well. You know, sitting them down and saying, what are your goals? What do you want to accomplish in life? You know, and understanding what those are for them and helping them achieve those. That's super important too.
Focusing on the people.
Yeah.
I love it. What are you super proud of this year?
Oh gosh, you know, for many years I was grinding it out, you know, and this year I have been able to kind of take a little bit of a step back from that and choose myself. It kind of goes back to that conversation that I said about it being literally sanity. You know, at some point I feel like if you don't choose yourself, your body's going to choose yourself, whether you want to or not. And so that's kind of where I am. You know, I didn't want to get to that point. And so I said, well, I'm going to start focusing on this. And I think, you know, this year, Carrie and I wanted to put our business out there more. We wanted to have more podcasts and more speaking engagements and, you know, start looking and sharing industry knowledge. And so that was a huge focus of ours. We've been able to do that. And I think getting to a point to where the business is working for me has been a focus of mine for a while. But this year, I feel like we were really able to kind of execute that. And so that's something I'm super proud of, because that allows me to go for 10 more years, you know?
Yeah, you gotta rest. That's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge. Now, I love to share the highlight reel because it's always nice to hear that, but I also like to share the other side of it
Yeah.
because we're real entrepreneurs. We're doing real stuff. What would you say what would you say is something that you haven't done that well this year that you're hoping to improve moving forward?
Yeah, so I would say that for a lot of the year, I wasn't super disciplined with my schedule. I just kind of was putting fires out. And for a lot of the year, I was like, man, this is crazy chaos. So I think making that switch has been huge for me. And it has opened up the door for a lot of the things that I wasn't able to receive before. So I think that, not being disciplined and allowing those fires to kind of take over my day was a huge, huge issue for the year. And that bleeds into your family life. It really does, because when you haven't managed your time very well and you've kind of allowed, whatever's happening to take over your day, you are working late and you have, things that you have to get taken care of. So I think being able to choose my family and myself and be more disciplined with my personal schedule has been an ongoing battle. This year I aced it. And I think relaxing a little bit and kind of letting like the systems that we have take hold and just go off, like, and then you can look at it from a different light, right? Troubleshoot it, launch it when it's 70, perfect it as it goes. And so yeah, so that's I would say, allowing the fires to kind of take over my day was a really big struggle for a lot of the year, but we've figured it out and I'm really happy about that. So
Woo! That's good. Those the fires will just spread so much, and then it does. It bleeds over, and then you're like, "Oh, I wasted a whole Saturday." Not wasted. I
yeah,
mean, spent a whole Saturday when you should have been spending some time with family.
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
guilty. I did this past Saturday, so it's fresh in mind. I'm having to, I guess, recoup or like whatever to my husband to make up for it and be like, Saturday is all you, baby. I'm
Yeah.
after
I
book
think
club.
it's hard to, I have ADHD. I don't mind talking about it, but so sometimes you get into this mode and you're like, I'm ready. I'm doing it. I'm focusing. I'm hyper focusing on this. I'm going to get it done. And then next thing you know, you look and it's like 7 o'clock. You haven't eaten, you're just like, oh my gosh. So I think too, looking into that superpower, it's a superpower as far as I'm concerned, but you do have to kind of harness that and figure out how you can manage it throughout the day. Otherwise it just eats your day up.
It does. It does. All right, I want to end on a high note. This is something I learned in the group right before we hopped on this call is you never end on a no. So we want to end on a yes. I want to end on a positive note. So to kind of package all of this up and put a pretty little bow on top of it, what you have to say, like some, I don't know, key takeaways that you want somebody that's listening to take away from this chat.
Yeah, I think business is it's the wild wild west out here. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that demand your attention, and I think, sometimes the hardest thing is just to keep putting your foot in one foot in front of the other. You just have to be disciplined with your schedule and just keep at it. Keep at it every day. Do one little thing that moves the needle, and not to be confused with putting out fires, because they're different, right? And so if you're out there in the weeds and you're struggling, you just need to look and say, okay, what's going to move the needle today? And sometimes that means choosing yourself, right? Sometimes it means I need to eat lunch. Sometimes it means I need to make that call I didn't want to make, or I give that feedback I didn't want to give. But I think just looking at that and picking, like if you're in the weeds, just pick the next best thing. Pick the next thing that is going to help move the needle. Because really it's just about being consistent. That's what it all boils down to. Carrie and I started our business $2,000 from the ground up, and that's how we got to 7 figures, is just every day being consistent. And so I think if you're in the weeds, do that. Do the next most consistent thing.
Consistency really is key. And thinking, and it's so cliche to like think about it, but it's like if you just do the things that you said you were going to do, your life, your business, everything would be so much better.
Absolutely. Yeah, just be consistent.
All right, well, cool. I truly appreciate you sharing all of this information. I know that the people that were tuning in, they got some good, valuable information, and anybody that's going to watch the playback, um, it's going to be a banger. My question is, if somebody's listening and they want to follow up with you, they want to ask you some questions, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, Lacie Nash. You can find me out there. We have Clean Squad page, also my personal page. You can find me at Lacie, Lacie, at culture-framework.com or Lacie at clean-squad.com. Either one of those. Social media, you can find us all over. You can Google my name, you'll find me. So, yeah, anywhere. There's lots of places.
Sweet. And if you want to hang out with us over in the She Built That community, I will include a link down below. And we're hanging out in there. You can send us messages. We're hanging out in the thread, giving as much valuable real life information as we can.
Absolutely.
Okay, I got one more question and then we can go ahead and hop off. But I'm going to end out the stream. Please don't close out, Lacie, because I need for your recording
To upload.
to render on my end so I can have it for repurposing.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right. It says, I love these interviews. So many good tips and information for those of us just getting started.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank you. This was so great. We appreciate you guys, and we will see you next time. Bye.